All right, let's talk playoff scenarios. The Pittsburgh Steelers find out tomorrow their playoff future, and it comes down to, well, I guess they could find out their playoff future tomorrow. It comes down to possibly winning the AFC North, potentially losing the AFC North and facing the Houston Texans, and worst case scenario, well, chances are they're going back to Baltimore because the Chargers win and the Steelers fall all the way to the 6th seed, which is not a place to be for a team that was 10-3 just 3 weeks ago, now heading into week 18, 10-6, and viewed as a massive concern for those of you rooting for the black and gold. Those are the 3 playoff scenarios. The Pittsburgh Steelers either win the North. To do so, the Baltimore Ravens have to lose. The Pittsburgh Steelers have to win. They claim the North. They play the Chargers. Thank you. The Chargers at Acrisure Stadium. They lose to the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Chargers win. The Pittsburgh Steelers head to Baltimore as the 6th seed, and things look, well, difficult. And the third option, most likely option, the Pittsburgh Steelers beat the Cincinnati Bengals. They head to Houston as the 5 seed, and they take on the Texans in the wild card round. You could rank these a number of ways. I think people have ranked them a number of ways. I think there's debate between one or the other. I think, quite frankly, the one that you could put to the top of the do not want to happen, sorry, pal, worst case scenario, I get it, but you just don't want to be there, is heading to Baltimore while also letting Joe Burrow into the playoffs. That is a double whammy. What just happened? Wow, did you just make things even worse? You didn't think it could get worse. You looked at it and said there's no chance this could get worse, and then it does get worse by letting Joe Burrow into the playoffs. I would say that's number one. Number two, in my opinion, is I might be crazy for saying this. And I understand that I was you get home field. You get your home field. But I personally think the second biggest challenge the Pittsburgh Steelers could have this wild card round is a Chargers team that does not look terrible and looks like a team that could put up a fight, that did put up a fight the last time you guys played. They have Jim Harbaugh, who he's a good coach, and they have Justin Herbert, who's a good quarterback. And they're not a bad team. This is not a scrum team. This is a team that is in a pretty good division this season and has won 10 games. So it could be a team to watch out for. I'm going to say that's 2. Might be a shocker to a lot of people, but I'm going 2 on that. And number 3, the Houston Texans do not scare me at all. Not even a little bit. They're a bad team whose division outside of them won a collective of like 6 games, maybe 10 games. That is, I mean, you're playing bad teams 6 times a year. You only won 10 games. It doesn't add up there. I am not. There's no part of me that's worried about the Houston Texans for any team in the playoffs. I think they are the least scary team in the entire bracket, maybe outside of Atlanta if they squeeze their way in, but I don't think they're going to. That's my order there. I would hate to go to Baltimore if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers. I would love to go to Houston, and as controversial as it is, I think the Los Angeles Chargers are your second most dangerous opponent in the wild card. And to be honest, there's almost no chance you're getting a home game in that second round because at that point, Buffalo's playing Denver. Nah, I don't. That doesn't concern me. I don't think they get it done. If it was somehow Cincinnati, yeah, that one, I could see that happening. But chances are you're not getting a home game in the second one or the third. So to take one more home game, I get it, but I think that you have an easier time going to Houston and winning that game. That's my list. Baltimore, Chargers, Houston. Scariest to least scary. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like the fact that Baltimore is the scariest. I think I would agree with that. Again, the Steelers do typically find ways to minimize Lamar Jackson. More than anybody else in the NFL, the Steelers can minimize Lamar Jackson. Doesn't mean I want to play him in the first round of the playoffs in Baltimore, no less. So I agree that that is the scariest. If we're looking at simply wild card weekend, I would rather have a home game, even if it's against the Chargers, than a road game against the Houston Texans. I think team-wise, the Chargers are a slightly better team than the Houston Texans. But I think the value of playing at home, especially with the areas that the Steelers have been struggling over this 3-game losing streak, look at where their struggles have been. Offensive line, the get off hasn't been there.
Yeah.
You're playing at home, you have a much better chance to have a better get off if you're the offensive line because you're not dealing with the extraneous crowd noise. And secondly, communication on the back end on defense. That's not going to be any easier at home, but I think being in that home environment, being able to host a team like the Chargers, who are going to be run first with the threat of Justin Herbert, I think allows the Steelers to get downhill, and I think it allows their defense to kind of get into the game a little bit sooner. So if we're looking at simply wild card weekend, I got to say I disagree with your 1 and 2. I think it's better off for the Steelers to be at home than it is for them to go on the road, even if the Texans don't look like the hottest team right now on paper, especially after that loss on Christmas Day. They don't. I still think being at home is valuable. I will say this, though, and this is my only caveat, and this is kind of you got to follow me, Steve Kornacki, tinfoil hat conspiracy here. If the Bengals are able to squeak in, I think that's better for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
What? Okay, I'm listening.
Because instead of Denver, who is a great story, Sean Payton's a good head coach, Bo Nix, much better than we all gave him credit for. I would give Joe Burrow and the Bengals a much better chance to walk into Buffalo and take down Josh Allen than I would Denver. So if you're looking out past the first round of the playoffs, that would mean the Steelers go visit the Texans in the wild card round, and then they avoid going to Buffalo or going to Kansas City in the second round, and then they play Baltimore, and potentially you never know what happens. Burrow has taken down Mahomes in Arrowhead before. You might not have to face either the Chiefs or the Bills to get to the Super Bowl. You have to face Houston, Baltimore, and Cincinnati. I think that is the path of least resistance for the Steelers to get to the Super Bowl. It is a lot of things have to go right. A lot of things have to go their way. But that, to me, whenever I'm trying to map out the path of least resistance to New Orleans in February, that's what it is to me.
That's I can't disagree with that. You can't sit here and say Baltimore in the divisional round, Cincinnati in the AFC Championship game wouldn't be the easiest route. Definitely not. Do I think that Joe Burrow, if Joe Burrow beats Buffalo and then Kansas City, I have any faith in the team beating him at that point on? Almost no. But that's possible. Like he could do that. Let's not act like he could do that. And
even if he doesn't, to be able to avoid Patrick Mahomes until the AFC Championship and be able to kind of gain some momentum beating 2 teams on the road, I think that makes it much better for the Steelers than having to go in there in the divisional round after beating up on a Texans team that has about as much momentum as the Steelers right now, which is none.
I agree. I don't disagree. I agree that that's the path of least resistance. I think it could. I'll eat my words. I think that it's actually a good thing for that to happen. I mean, now having to play, that's the thing though. Whoa, let's go back. Because
you can
for the Steelers, for the Steelers to let Cincinnati into the playoffs, they have to lose, which means they play Baltimore in the first round.
Not if LA loses.
Okay, now we're living in a perfect world.
I told you it's a Steve Kornacki tinfoil hat. You got to follow the buttons. There's a lot going on in this.
All right, who's LA play? Who does LA play?
They play the Raiders.
It was good until that.
They're also probably resting some players as well. But
who is LA?
I would imagine. Either way,
maybe.
That's why
if the Steelers don't, but if the Steelers lose, there's no chance they're resting starters. There's no chance they're looking at it and going, we want to do play. It's just like the Steelers. Like, why would this, nobody's sitting there. LA's not different. They're not going, we actually want the Harbaugh Bowl. That's what we're looking for. Why would we want to go to Houston? That sounds terrible. They'd want to go to Houston. They would play enough to win that game. I think that's the only hole there. I think that's the only hole. Besides that, I like it. In a perfect world, I think it would be fantastic.
Yes.
And it would help. I think you have a much better chance of beating Baltimore and Lamar Jackson at that point than you do Joe Burrow after he beats both Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, which I think could happen. Like, I think could be a real thing. And at that point, there's a lot of people in this country rooting for the Cincinnati Bengals to pull this thing off. There's a ton actually, because that's just what Joe Cool does, man. That's what he does. I like that. I like your conspiracy theory. We'll see what happens. In an order, we'll see what happens by Sunday morning. We'll have some idea, maybe an answer, and by Monday we will certainly know what the Pittsburgh Steelers playoff routes look like.